You are standing in the courtyard of a fortress that stinks of smoke and iron. The year is 1218. The city is Atra, and it is dying. In front of you, a man is screaming, but not the way men usually scream. The sound is thinner, wet, as if something vital inside him is boiling. They are holding him down. For soldiers, his arms are clamped. His legs kick uselessly against the stone. Above him, another man is tipping a bronze crucible. And you see how liquid silver, white and hot, sparkling like moonlight that has become solid, flows in a thin, precise stream into his left eye. It doesn't splash, it flows. The man's body stiffens. His mouth tears open, but the scream dies halfway, replaced by a choking, gurgling sound. The silver keeps tumbling into the air now. You can smell it, the burning flesh and metal and something else. Something sweet and wrong. His skull cracks, not loudly, just a soft, wet pop like an egg cracking under pressure. Steam rises from the holes in his head, and then finally he stops moving. You have just witnessed the execution of Anilik, governor of Atra. His crime, killing a caravan of Mongol envoys and stealing their goods. Genghis Khan's envoys. This wasn't war. This was a message written in molten metal and bone. By the time Genghis Khan finished with the Khwarezm Empire, over 1 million people would be dead. Cities would disappear. Entire bloodlines would be erased. And it all started here in this courtyard of silver and screams. The Mongol Empire from 1206 to 1368 swallowed up 24 million square kilometers of land. Bigger than Rome, bigger than Alexander's conquest, bigger than anything the world had ever seen. And they didn't just take land. They took fear itself and weaponized it. But the execution you just saw, the melted silver, the cracked skull, the wet silence afterward, it was mercy compared to what came next. Inelchik wasn't just any governor. He guarded the western gate of the Silk Road, where east met west, where caravans crossed into Mongol territory under the Khan's protection. And Inelchik breached that protection. When the caravan arrived in 1218, for 150 merchants with a fortune's worth of goods, Inelchik accused them of espionage, confiscated everything, and executed them all. Their heads were mounted on spikes outside the city walls. Genghis Khan sent 3 ambassadors demanding justice. The Sharon of Khoras responded by beheading 2 and shaving the beard of the 3rd before sending him back. You don't humiliate Genghis Khan and expect to see spring. 6 months later, the Mongol army stormed the walls of Atra. After a 5-month siege, they dragged Inelchik out of a storage tower where he had been hiding among sacks of grain. But here's the thing about the silver. The Persian chronicler Jajani documented that the Mongols melted down the exact silver Inelchik had stolen. They measured it, heated it until it glowed white, and then made him pay back through his face. The eye socket fills, but the fluid continues to flow past the eye bone into the sinuses. The heat boils the tissue. Fluids expand. Pressure builds until your skull cracks. The ear canals get worse and narrower. The silver first collects in the inner ear, cooks the eardrum, and seeps toward the brain. You're deaf before you're dead, blind before you're silent. Inelchik fought for 2 minutes, then went stiff. By minute 3, he was still breathing. Short gasps, but his eyes were gone. Only silver, dripping down his cheeks like quicksilver tears. They left his body for 3 days. When they moved him, his head clinked against the stone, heavy, weighed down by stolen metal. It was about principles. Steal from the Khan's merchants. Die from what you stole. Every merchant who passed through Atra understood that. But here's what they don't tell you. This was considered mild, because Anilik was just a governor. For nobles who betrayed the Khan, there were fates darker than melted silver. And the method reserved for the nobility required nothing more than a blanket and patient horses. There's a blanket lying in the ground. 1221. 3 generals of the Khwarezmic Empire are sewn inside thick felt blankets. Not tied sewn. Heavy threads sewn tightly along the edges. One general is already screaming before they're done. He knows what's coming. Raw, animal panic. They roll him up tightly. Arms pinned to his sides, face pressed against his knees. Unable to move. Can barely breathe. The felt traps everything. Heat, air sound. His screams come out muffled, distant. Then they lay the rolls flat on the clear ground. And the horses come, not galloping, walking. A line of cavalry moves at a controlled pace. One by one, each horse steps onto the rolled carpet. Inside, the man feels his ribs bend. The first round doesn't break anything, just compresses. Squeezes air out of the lungs. Second horse. Third by the 10th horse. The ribs crack in 3 places. Every breath is a stabbing pain, worse than suffocation. Rashid al-Din documented that this was reserved exclusively for the nobility. The Mongols believed that shedding royal blood cursed the land, so they found a way to kill without cutting. 15 to 30 minutes, legs breaking, femurs snapping like green wood, pelvis fractures, spines compressing vertebra by vertebra, but head trauma comes last. You feel everything else break first. Hear the wet crunch of your skeleton collapsing as the felt holds you perfectly still. One general lived for 23 minutes. When they rolled out the blanket, his eyes were still open. His mouth full of blood from internal bleeding, lungs punctured by his own ribs. No cuts, no external wounds. Technically, there was no blood spilled. Bloodless. But here's the cruelest part. If you were rolled up second, you heard the first man's bones breaking, heard the muffled sounds, heard who comes closer. The waiting men snapped before the execution even began. Yet even this systematic horror was reserved for individuals. But what happened when you stole from the Khan's treasury? That was when fire and water became purification. A bronze cauldron in Kakaram, big enough for a hunchman. 2 Chinese tax collectors skimmed the Khan's tribute. Not much, just enough. Except that it was Khan's money. When the auditors tracked it down, there was no trial, just the cauldron itself. They filled it with cold water and set it over a birch fire that had been burning since dawn. They were in no hurry. The first official watched as they placed him over the cauldron, the soldiers holding him feet first. They lowered him slowly. His feet touched the surface. They weren't boiling yet. They were just simmering. He screamed because he knew what was coming. The water was hot enough to turn his skin pink immediately. They lowered him down to his calves and then stopped. They held his knees and let the temperature rise. The Yuan wrote this down in brutal detail because it was meant to be remembered by every bureaucrat in the empire. In minute 3, the skin on his feet peels off in patches like wet paper peeling off. The water turns reddish. The smell, boiled meat and copper. They lower him down to his thighs. His screams change to more primal. Raw pain falls through tearing throat. Around minute 5, the screams stop. Not because he's dead, because the steam has scarred his throat from the inside, burned his vocal cords. His silence is now open mouth, bulging eyes, still alive, still feeling everything, just can't scream. That's when they lower him all the way down. The water boils. His head goes under. 20 seconds of mashing beneath the surface. Then it slows, weakens, stops. Total time, 8 to 12 minutes. When they pull him up, he doesn't look human. The skin is gone in places. What remains is gray, white, bloated, gaping, eyes blindfolded, boiled in their sockets. They display the body for 3 days while the other official watches from a cage. On the 3rd day, they boil him in the same water. This was not rage. In the Mongol worldview, theft was spiritual pollution. Fire purifies, water purifies. They boiled out the corruption in the public search. After 1232, embezzlement in the province fell to almost nothing for decades. Fear was not a byproduct of Mongol justice. Fear was justice. But these were targeted executions, one person at a time. What came next was on an industrial scale. A monument visible for miles around, not built of stone. You smell it 5 kilometers from Nishapa before you see it. Human rod, thick with claws. Then you see the pyramid, 6 meters high, made of heads. Nishapura, 1221. The city killed Takucha, Genghis Khan's favorite son-in-law, during the siege. When it fell, the Khan's daughter personally patrolled Eurasia from house to house. Every person, man, woman, child, was dragged out into the streets. The Persian historian Juvani claimed that 1.7 million died. Even if that's an exaggeration, it's hundreds of thousands, and they kept the heads. Mongol engineers stacked them in perfect pyramids. Several pyramids arranged in grids outside the city walls, concentric circles, each layer smaller than the one below. They used lime and clay as mortar between the skulls. The lime slowed the decay enough to keep the structure stable. Every 10th head was marked with wooden tags, numbers scratched in, an accounting system. Even during mass executions, they kept records. The pyramid stood for 3 to 5 years. Travelers on the Silk Road saw these towers of bones. Some heads still had hair. Long black hair on women's skulls was braided and stiff. Beards on men meant something with dust. The smell spread for miles. On hot days, you could catch it half a day at once. It was deliberate. After Nishapur, the surrender rate in Persia increased by 70%. The rumor spread. People learned, fight the Mongols, and your head will be an ornament. But here's the darkest detail Giovanni mentions. Some pyramids had a person buried alive inside the base. They forced a prisoner, usually a nobleman, into a pit and then built head by head, layer by layer. The person at the bottom couldn't move, just felt the weight increase, heard more heads being added. The clay crackled and they screamed. For hours, sometimes a whole day, muffled by earth, bones, and lime. A terrible hollow sound from inside the structure. When the screams stopped, the engineers considered the pyramid finished. This was not madness. This was politics. The calculated transformation of human bodies into propaganda, into warnings that lasted for years and could be smelled a mile away. But even terror on an industrial scale was not personal. For men who had once called Genghis Khan brother, there was something worse. Something that took 40 years of friendship and turned it into the slowest pain imaginable. There's a man tied face down to a tree trunk. His name is Jamuka. 40 years ago, he and Genghis Khan were brothers by choice. As boys, they performed the Anders ceremony, exchanged bones, swore to be one soul in two bodies. They hunted together, fought together, slept in the same tent in the winter when survival meant keeping each other warm. Then ambition tore them apart. 20 years of war. When Jamuka finally lost, betrayed by his own followers, he begged for mercy. Not for his life, for his death. "Give me a noble death," he said. The secret history of the Mongols records his words. Let no blood fall on the ground. He asked for a blanket execution, because after all they had been brothers. Genghis Khan looked at him for a long time. Then he ordered the log. Mongol justice was not about cruelty. It was about proportion. The punishment had to match the ratio. A stranger who betrayed you got the sword. Done quickly. But someone you had loved, someone you had chosen as family, it required something more. The executioner places his sword at the root of Jamuka's neck. A continuous cut from neck to loin, through skin, fat down to muscle. Blood wells up, runs down both sides. Then comes the knife, smaller, sharper. He works it under the skin, peels it back slowly, wet tearing sounds, connective tissue, separating. Now you can see vertebrae, white bones, the spinal cord beneath its membrane, ribs curling away, and Jamuka is still conscious. Your back doesn't have enough large vessels to kill quickly. You can lose skin, lose muscle, and survive for minutes. 5, 8, sometimes longer. You feel air in parts of yourself that should never touch air. Jamuka lasted 7 minutes. For 4 minutes he tried to speak. His mouth moved, words were lost. Around minute 5 the shaking stopped, but his eyes remained open. He died between minutes 6 and 7. No dramatic moment, just gradual absence. They left his body outside Genghis Khan's tent for a week. The message of blood brotherhood means nothing if you break it. Jamuka's name appears in the secret history exactly once after. He, once referred to the Khan, died without honor and is not mentioned again. Genghis Khan never mentioned his name again. Not once. Not for 40 years. That was the real punishment. Not the pain, but the absence of memory. You betrayed the Brotherhood. So the Brotherhood forgets you existed. But betraying the Brotherhood gave erasure. What about desertion? Cowardice in battle. For that purpose, a method was invented that turned 300 men into part of the earth itself. You lie on your back, stakes driven through your wrists and ankles, pinned flat. 12:11. The Battle of Yahuling has just ended. You ran, dropped your sword, ripped off your armor, ran until you collapsed. The Mongols noticed. They always noticed. Now you and 300 other deserters are whipped across a field. You hear horses walking in single file. 50 horses, maybe more. The first horse reaches the man to your left, steps on his shin. Crack. The scream is loud, shrill. Horse steps on belly. The scream breaks off. Wet gurgle. Your turn comes on horse 3. The hoof lands on your shin. 1,000 pounds concentrated in 4 inches. The leg shatters. White-hot pain shoots through you. Right leg, same thing. Then your pelvis, something deep inside, gives way. Then your stomach, everything compresses, presses against your ribcage. You can't breathe. The horse stands there, finds its balance, then steps forward. You gasp, taste copper because your stomach has just burst, but you're still conscious. Method dictates that horses avoid the head until later passes. 5 horses. 10. 15. Around 12 o'clock, you can't feel your legs. Nothing left to feel. Bones shatter into fragments. Muscles crush to paste. Past 16 cracks ribs. Pop, pop, pop. Each one punctures something. You drown in your own blood. Past 19 reaches your face. You see the hoof coming. Black iron shoe blocks the sun, lands on your forehead. Your skull is compressed, bends. It takes 360 kg to break. The horse is 1,000. For a terrible moment it holds. Then it cracks loudly from within. The world turns white, then red, then gray. Smaller than anything else. When the cavalry is finished, the field looks like a cultivated garden. 300 shapes that used to be men, now depressions in the mud, flat, broken, and mixed with earth. The symbolism: you step back into battle, so your punishment was stepped on. Earth down into the very dirt you ran over. But even this was not the rarest punishment. There was one execution so rare that it was only used twice in the entire reign of Genghis Khan. And it required 4 horses and terrible mathematics. 4 horses, for ropes, for directions. You in the middle. You entered O.J. Khan's camp with a poison leaf. Reached the tent flap before the guards found your knife. Now you're naked. Thick hemp rope around each wrist, each ankle. Rope stretched 15 meters for war horses. Spread eagle on the ground. The executioner raises his hand. His hand falls. All 4 horses jump. Your body doesn't know which way to go. Stretch tight. Then your hip pops. Goes joint by joint. 30 seconds of sustained pulling. Muscle tears fiber by fiber. Then the whole leg rips free. Skin failure. Blood spurts. You're still conscious. Left leg. Another 30 seconds. Pop, tear, spurt. Now you're just torso and 2 arms. Still conscious. Right arm, 40 seconds. Tears free. Left arm follows. Now you're just head and torso. Leakage without limbs. Total process, 3 to 4 minutes. You die around limb 3 or 4. The symbolism was perfect. You try to separate the Khan from his life. So the Khan separated you from your limbs. Rashid al-Din documented that this was used exactly twice during Genghis Khan's lifetime, both times for regicide attempts, both in front of the entire army. After 1235, there were no recorded assassination attempts on Mongol Khans for 30 years. Touching the Khan, and your body becomes arithmetic. For horses, for limbs, for directions. Zero you. None of this was madness. Each execution had a reason to violate the trade in molten silver. Die for what you stole. Boiling alive. Treasury theft. Fire purifies pollution. Spinal splitting. Betrayal of the Brotherhood. They crushed your body and erased your memory. Skull pyramids. Billboards visible from miles around. Carpet execution. Bloodless death for the nobility. Quartering. You tried to split the Khan, so he split you. The Mongol Empire did not conquer through strength alone. They conquered through fear so calculated that cities surrendered before the arrows flew. By 1279, the empire stretched from Korea to Hungary. 24 million square kilometers. 1 in 5 people lived under Mongol rule. Most never saw a Mongol soldier. They just heard the stories. They heard, and they surrendered. So the question isn't whether it went too far. The question is, how did fear become the most valuable resource in the medieval world? How did these methods build the largest land empire in history? Was this genius, monstrosity, both? Write your answer below. And if you're still here, if you've seen this entire journey through calculated cruelty, you're part of the Crimson Historians now. Hit subscribe, because this dark story doesn't tell itself. It needs witnesses. It needs people willing to remember the uncomfortable parts. Still here, but won't subscribe? Tell us honestly what's stopping you. We read every single one because that's what real history looks like. Not just glory, not just conquest, but calculated, systematic, unforgettable fear that shaped empires and rewrote how humans understood power.